At 82, I've had my share of life experiences, and most of them I wouldn't change. But there's one decision that still weighs heavily on me: moving into a nursing home. At the time, it seemed like the best option. My family reassured me it was the right choice, that I'd be well cared for, comfortable, and surrounded by people looking out for me. I trusted them. I believed them. But once I was inside, reality hit me like a wave. Life in a nursing home wasn't what I had imagined, and it wasn't something I could simply walk away from. If you're considering this step, whether for yourself or a loved one, I want to share 6 hard lessons I wish I had known before making this life-changing decision. Stay with me, because what I learned might just change the way you see nursing homes forever. 1. Losing my independence. The biggest shock wasn't the small room, the scheduled meals, or the unfamiliar faces. It was the realization that I was no longer in control of my own life. Before, I decided when to wake up, what to eat, how to spend my day. I could step outside whenever I pleased, sit in my favorite chair, or cook a meal just the way I liked it. But inside the nursing home, everything ran on someone else's schedule. Breakfast at a fixed time, whether I was hungry or not. Lights out at a certain hour, whether I was ready for bed or not. Even something as simple as going for a walk required permission, and more often than not, I had to wait for someone to assist me. I remember waking up that first week reaching for my book and realizing that the room around me didn't feel like mine. My belongings, my comforts, my little joys, they were gone. What remained were sterile walls, a bed I didn't choose, and a sinking feeling that my freedom had quietly slipped away. The hardest part? Once you surrender your independence, getting it back is almost impossible. You stop arguing when they tell you what's for dinner. You stop asking if you can go outside when you want. You learn to adapt. But in the process, you start losing yourself. Before you take that step, ask yourself, are you ready to give up the small freedoms that make life yours? Because once they're gone, you'll miss them more than you ever thought possible. 2. The feeling of being forgotten. When I first moved in, my family reassured me that they'd visit often, and for a little while, they did. My daughter would come by once a week. My grandchildren would stop in on weekends. It felt like I still had a connection to my old life. But as time passed, the visits became less frequent. My daughter started calling instead of coming. My grandkids got busy. Holidays were the hardest. Everyone promised they'd visit, but somehow, plans always changed at the last minute. I'll never forget sitting in the common room one evening, watching other residents stare at the door, hoping today would be the day someone remembered them. The truth is, life moves on. Not because your family stops loving you, but because when you're no longer part of their daily routine, it's easy for them to assume you're doing fine. I remember picking up my phone, debating whether to call my son. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to remind him that I was sitting here waiting. So I put the phone down. And that's when it hit me. This was my life now. Watching the days pass, hoping someone would think of me. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, can you handle the loneliness? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once you're out of sight, it's easier than you think to become out of mind. 3. Losing my sense of purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just changing my address. I didn't realize I was also changing my purpose. At home, I had responsibilities. I watered my plants. I brewed my morning coffee. I tidied up my space. Small things, but they gave my days meaning. But in the nursing home, those little routines disappeared. Meals were brought to me. Cleaning was done for me. My plants, well, they weren't mine anymore. At first, I told myself it would be nice to just relax. But after a few weeks, I realized something was missing. The days stretched long, empty. I watched as other residents slowly withdrew, sitting silently, waiting for the hours to pass. I'll never forget George, an 84-year-old carpenter who had spent his life building things. He was always fixing, creating, using his hands. But here, there was nothing for him to do. No tools, no projects. One day he looked at me and said, "I feel useless." And I knew exactly what he meant. Without a purpose, the mind slows. The body follows. And soon you start to feel like you're just existing, not living. Before you move into a nursing home, ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Because once you're inside, it's much harder to hold on to the things that make you feel alive. 4. Declining health. Faster than expected. Before I moved in, I was in decent shape for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could take care of myself, cook my meals, go for walks. I had routines that kept me moving. But once I was inside, those routines disappeared. Meals were prepared for me. I didn't have to stand in the kitchen anymore. If I needed something, I just had to press a button. And slowly I stopped moving. At first, it seemed harmless, but then my legs felt weaker. Standing up became harder, and before I knew it, getting out of a chair was a struggle. I saw it happen to others, too. People who walked in on their own started relying on wheelchairs. The more help we received, the more we seemed to need it. Alice, my neighbor, was 81 when she moved in. She was determined to stay active, but after a few months, she stopped walking as much. Then she needed a walker, then a wheelchair. One day she told me, "I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." If you don't use your body, you lose it. And in a place designed to make life easier, it's easy to forget that movement isn't just about convenience, it's about survival. 5. The loss of privacy and dignity. At home, I had my space. I could close my door, sit in silence, and live on my own terms. In a nursing home, privacy is a luxury. Staff come in and out, scheduled room checks, shared spaces, even something as simple as taking a shower required waiting for help. I wasn't just living, I was being managed. And the hardest part? You start to feel less like yourself, more like a patient, just another name on a list. 6. It's harder to leave than you think. When I moved in, I told myself it was temporary. If I didn't like it, I could always leave. But what I didn't realize was how hard leaving would actually be. My house had been sitting empty. My kids started selling things, making decisions without me. The longer I stayed, the weaker I became. The independence I once had was slipping away, and before I knew it, going home felt impossible. I don't regret growing older, but I do regret believing that a nursing home was my only choice. If I could do it over, I would have explored other options, because once you move in, life will never be the same. If you're considering a nursing home, think carefully. You deserve to live on your own terms for as long as possible.